Good morning and welcome to Dr. Hood's Helping Others Overcome Determinants LLC. Today we're going to discuss the Clinical Research Associate Life topic open discussion for July 12th, 2025. I wanted to start these open discussions to point out different scenarios that's associated with the CRA life. Uh, Moving forward, individuals know that you're going to possibly have to travel and move from site to site. Uh, you're going to have a background in clinical research as a study coordinator, or maybe not have a background in clinical research. So we wanted today talk about, are there any advantages of being a study coordinator before becoming a CRA? So the open discussion topic is, are there advantages to being a clinical research coordinator before becoming a clinical research associate? To the CRAs that were not previously CRCs, did you feel that posed any challenges? So my background, I was previously a CRC. And I think what helped me be a good study coordinator is before becoming a coordinator, I was previously a patient care tech. And so the patient care tech was my beginning in 2003 to 2010. And then I got into research in 2011. So being a patient care tech initially already allowed me to be used to patient interaction, understanding of the informed consent process, because a lot of medical procedures, of course, require a consent form. Understanding the importance of confidentiality and protecting the patient's medical records came from me being a patient care tech, calling patients back and asking for their name and date of birth so we can identify them. So those are all things that allowed me to, I think, prep me to be a study coordinator. I already knew how to do vital signs. I already knew about doing EKGs. I already knew about who to call within the facility to schedule. So those were definitely great benefits of me being a patient care tech before I became a study coordinator. And then in 2011, being a study coordinator, who initially my primary role was subject recruitment, allowed me to understand uh, the inclusion exclusion criteria. So I was very aware of how to read medical records, compare them to the inclusion exclusion criteria of a protocol, and then determine if the patient was worth pre-screening. So I usually could get it narrowed down, and the only thing that usually would exclude a person is, of course, the labs that were taken during the screening process. Rarely did I recruit a patient that was on prohibited medication or had a prohibited indication that stopped them from being in the study. And that's why my recruitment was very successful. I did that for about 6 months before I started doing pilot studies that were created by one of the investigators. And then about a year in, I started doing pharmaceutical clinical trials. I personally think that being a CRC is a great benefit before becoming a CRA, because you're already acclimated to the processes of a site. You already understand the different visit types that you go. You already understand the importance of providing the CRO the correct information as far as how many patients you can recruit, how to express recruitment barriers, how to knowing what should and shouldn't be reported to the IRB as far as SAE or protocol deviations. So having that background as a study coordinator was very beneficial, but before becoming a CRA. And we're going to go over a few acronyms in clinical research, and I will further discuss why being that coordinator was beneficial. Okay, so just first and foremost, knowing the acronyms that are associated with being a CRA came from me being a CRC, knowing what the CRF was, case report file. I know that that is associated with the EDC system, which is another acronym for electronic data capture. And I know that's how we electronically chart or centralize charting so that the CRO or the monitor can go in and review the data that we put in per subjects. Um, the CTMS or the clinical trial management system are the electronic charting systems. Now, we were paper charting throughout my trials, but we had eventually developed E-Reg, which was Florence, and we were going to consider choosing one of the electronic systems to chart in, but that hadn't happened before I left in 2021. The IRB, the Institutional Review Board. So I worked for an academic clinical research site. So we had our own IRB, and we used the local I'm sorry, the central IRB that the sponsors or the CROs want us to use. But we only use Word. We were only contracted to use Word that eventually became Copernicus or WCG. But another thing that was moving or changing as I was leaving, we were going to open up the window to use other IRBs. Ideally, the IRB that the sponsor or the CRO was using for that clinical trial. So uh, that uh, that was very influential from being a study coordinator to knowing that process of, and then how contracts are developed or budgets are developing, and knowing that in my institution they, a lot of the questions that was asked during the quality visit, can the RB approval process and the contract and budget process run concurrently, or did you have to have IRB approval first and then you can get your contract? So being familiar with completing quality visits as a CRC allowed me to understand that process. Investigational product, because I was one of the individuals that are assigned to dispense the drug, I had a strong understanding of drug accountability. So when I initially became a CRA and I was a unblinded CRA first, understanding that was just not a piece of paper that you look at to do reconciliation for drug accountability. I knew I had to look at the label. I knew about the IRT confirmation. IRT stands for the Interactive Response Technology System. So that's the system that we use to randomly assign drugs, so it won't have any bias. And I was familiar with, you need to look at the IRT confirmation, then look at the lab kit of the IP to make sure it matches. Make sure that um, the CRC has charted that they just when they dispense and what was in that amount, and then what was the return amount. Then compare that to, if applicable, if that data needed to be put into the EDC system, compare that information to the EDC system, and then of course the master IP log, the site's total inventory. Compare that. Also, as a study coordinator, I understand the importance of retrieving the IP and making sure we immediately place it in the correct storage facility, storage conditions, whether that was the refrigerator, freezer, or room temp. Already knowing that 2 to 8 degrees Celsius was for refrigerator storage. Typically, room storage was 20 to 25 degrees Celsius, and the freezer storage was typically below 20 degrees Celsius or below 7, needed to be in a place in a 70 -70 freezer. So all of those things equip me to be a great CRA. Also coming from a smaller research site, we had a regulatory specialist that handled all of our submissions and our contract negotiations and all that sort of thing. But when we had a monitor to come to the site, we were primarily as study coordinators responsible for making sure that ISF, which is the investigational site file, making sure that that was complete for the monitor. Now, if something was missing, we were able to go to the regulatory specialist and, inquire what that document was if it wasn't on the shared drive. But if she had already uploaded it to the shared drive, we could print it off and file it in the system for our monitor. So all those things as a study coordinator prepared me to understand the importance of going to a site, being prepared, but not only that, knowing how to treat your study coordinators. 9 times out of 10, you as a CRA, your site is not, you are not your only site CRA. You're not your only site study. So it's important to treat your study coordinators and your PIs with a level of respect that shows them, hey, I know it's important that we have great data quality. We understand patient safety, but also remember they're adults. They're not your employees, and then you got to talk to them and treat them with the level of respect. When they do well, compliment them on doing well. When they make a mistake, re-educate them. Don't condemn them, re-educate them. That's important. And when you, I think, are previously a study coordinator, you understand how to deal with your sites. When you can be a CRA and you've done a lot of prep for a visit, especially a SIV visit, and you sent the agenda, you know, or you got on your schedule that I'm gonna talk to the PI at this time. We're gonna go over these slides at this time, these slides at this time, and then the PI might even come in and sit down, and then beep beep beep, he get a page or he gets a phone call, and they have to dart out. You have to know how to adjust as a CRA. And being a previously coordinator, you know that those things happens. So if the PI, if he or she has to rush out, you need to be able to redirect and deal with the personnel that you have and train them on the things that you can train them on that might not necessarily be something that the PI has to go over in detail. Or you can take that time to review the ISF until the PI is back available. But those type of scenarios, being a CRSC preps you for. Now, that doesn't mean that just because you was a CRC, you're going to be the perfect CRA. Because some people just can't make that transition. And that doesn't mean because you wasn't a CRC that you're not a good CRA. But there are some great benefits of being a CRC first. Okay, let's take example. If you already knew how to draw blood and your site has a patient that it's just hard for them to draw the blood, you can give them some tips that you used to use. Okay, have the patient drink about 8 ounces of water before you draw that blood. Usually water doesn't interfere with that fasting requirement because it's water. Put a blood pressure cuff on their arm and see if you can get the blood in their hand. That was one of my tricks. Warm make sure the hands are not cold, or warm their hands, like maybe put a blanket over their hands for a few minutes and see if you can get their blood. Those are some of the things that you, or say for instance, a site is having a hard time getting medical records, especially if it's associated with an SAE. And they's like, well, I keep faxing and the place, then maybe you from your experience can tell them, hey, call hospital administration, let them know that you are repeatedly trying to get medical records and nobody's answering in the medical records department. You've seen a medical release such and such time. Always document how many times you sent it, put it in the subject chart, your attempts. But me and the study coordinator, those kind of things click. Those kind of things you are familiar with. Again, if you wasn't a previous CRC, you can learn these techniques. But if you were a CRC for at least, I would say, 2 years, you've pretty much seen it all. Another benefit of being a study coordinator previously, you may have undergone an FDA audit or IRB or regulatory facility inspection. So you're already familiar with the process. They're going to come in, they're going to request certain documents, they're going to request certain charts. After, they're going to pull different personnels to either interview them collectively or solo, and then they're going to write their report. Anything that they find, you have the experience of knowing how to handle. You've already heard about corrective and preventative action because you, as a study coordinator, have already experienced those things. Let's see what's else. You understand the importance of visit windows as it's associated to the CRA, and knowing the importance of scheduling in advance, because site staffs have off days, they have vacation days, they might have to close due to weather. And so because you experience these things as a study coordinator, you kind of know how to better prepare as a CRA. Um, let's see. When it comes to data source verification and data source review, you kind of understand the importance of charting and reminding your site to chart ahead of time. You emphasize those things because you don't want to keep coming to a site and then you have to wait for them to chart so you can do your job. But on the flip side, you have a little bit more understanding. Let me investigate why they're not charted. Has somebody been fired? Has somebody resigned? Um, are they having technical issues? Is the person just not understanding the importance of charting within the specified agreement, whether that's 3 days after the subject's visit or 5 days after the subject visit? So you have a little bit more insight on how to handle re-educating that study coordinator and investigating the whys when you were previously a study coordinator. You can also kind of look at, in my opinion, be a little bit more keen when doing reconciliation with medications and medical histories. So we know not all medical history is going to have a necessarily medicine treatment, but all medicines should have an associated indication. And so as a person that had collected medical histories and comments as a study coordinator, you're a little bit more familiar with different brands of medicines, their generic form and their trade name, and knowing what indication that they're treated with. So for instance, I was in endocrinology and I knew metformin was a diabetes medication. But I also knew that it was given to patients who have a polycystic ovary syndrome. And so if a person that's not familiar with medication see metformin and they Google it and they say, okay, this is a diabetes med, but this person don't have diabetes, and just make the assumption that that medication is a mistake, having that medical background lets you know that sometimes drugs be used for different reasons. Okay, let's say now, when I was doing diabetes research, and Ozempic and Byetta and those GLP-1 medications, they were primarily used to treat diabetes. And I know the PIs would tell the patient, but they also may suppress your appetite, and so you might lose a little weight with them as well. And now we know that these drugs are now being marketed just for weight loss. So having a medical background or a CRC background before coming a CRA makes you a little bit more also familiar with medical terminology. And so the objective was to get people who were study coordinators and who were not study coordinators to chime in and talk about what they feel like were their pros and cons. But maybe after watching this video, they can make their comments in the comment section. And so I just wanted to share my journey, just to say, all CRAs don't have the same background. So again, I was a patient care tech first from 2023 to 2029, and then a lead patient care tech. And I feel that this prepped me to be a good study coordinator. At the time, my initial title was called research specialist, and again, my primary role was to recruit and just help the study nurse, the research nurse. And then I became a clinical trial specialist, and then we were named clinical trial administrators for the non-nurses. And so that was our titles. And then I want to say in 2017, the company I worked for started to develop what was called a career ladder. And they wanted to, I guess you can say, synchronize the titles, because a person could be a clinical trial administrator and they were actually seeing the patients, and then they could have the title as a clinical trial administrator and they had no dealings with the patients. They were just handle the administrative aspect of clinical research. So they wanted to get away from people having the same title but doing a totally different job description. So this is when they came up with the clinical research coordinator, a clinical research administrator, and a clinical research data entry person, and then a clinical research regulatory special coordinator. And those all had tier 1, 2, and 3. And then once you got past the 3, you could become a manager and then director. So that's why, even though my title wasn't study coordinator with these roles, that's what I was. And your education can also be different. Some people do have that science-based education before becoming a CRC or a CRA, and some do not. They might have a BS in English or a BS in psychology or sociology. And so you can have a different background. Preferably, they want you to have a science background, but with experience as a previous study coordinator, you can get around that. And then I wanted to make myself more competitive because, again, I was not a nurse. I ended up taking the certified medical assistance exam in 2014, and I passed. And so I was able to do a little bit more. I was able to give vaccine shots and some hormone shots because of that, taking that certification. But with the Masters of Science in Clinical Research Administration, I focused on more of the history of clinical research. I learned about the 20-year patent restrictions that clinical trials have before they can prove that their drug worked, get it to market before a Me Too company can come in. I learned about IRB and GCP regulations, getting my master's. It was a great experience. And then I went on to become get my doctorate of public health. I wanted to go a little further in my education because my initial goal was to be a medical doctor. And then I got into research, hoping that that would steer me into medicine. But I loved it so much. Learned about the different opportunities that were not presented to me when I was in high school, and I just stayed on the research track. And so again, some people don't have all of this education. And believe it or not, some people do have a degree as an MD, whether they decided not to complete their residency program, or they were MD in another country and then came to the United States and didn't want to go over re-educating and doing the residency program again. There are a lot of CRAs who were have the education or medical degree background. So I didn't realize how common that was until I started working for a CRO. I didn't also realize how many medical doctors become study coordinators, and they do that for a year or two with the goal of eventually transitioning to a pharmaceutical company to either being a medical liaison or a medical director. Because from my understanding, not all medical directors require an active medical license. You just have to have had a previous license and a completed your residency. But don't quote me on that. But that is just something that I heard from another individual who was a medical doctor in his country, and then has come to the United States for has been a study coordinator, I think he said, for like the last 20 years, and this was in 2021. And his goal was to be a CRA for a year and then transition into the medical monitoring. That's what it is, medical monitoring role. So there's a lot of opportunities in clinical research. I do strongly feel that being a study coordinator or even a lab tech or a data entry person, I do feel that having some association with a site role better prepares you to be a CRA. But that doesn't mean that you can't absorb the training that you receive from your onboarding process and the training that you receive from your peers to be a dynamic CRA. Um, so don't get discouraged if you're not a study coordinator first. Okay, so this question, are there any tangible solutions to bridge the learning curve? So for people who were not previously CRCs, are there any tangible solutions? And of course, you can a lot of CROs or pharmaceutical companies have a mentor program. You can get with a junior or a senior CRA and observe from them, ask them about tips. Your line manager is supposed to be a great resource of how to bridge that gap between any learning curves you have of being a CRA. I love being a CRA because it combines my love for teaching and my love for healthcare. I just had the opportunity to complete my first assessment um, visit on yesterday. So I assessed another CRA on how well they completed a closeout visit. And I want to say that that was a great experience. But the areas where I saw that there was a learning curve, I presented those to that individual. So the individual did not have that site from beginning to the end. And that's this is another tip for CRAs. If you do not have a site from beginning to the end, if you can't go back and look at previous patients, I definitely encourage you to go back and look at the investigator site file, because that is the main goal of the closeout visit, to make sure that that investigator site file is complete. And just for having 15 minutes of spot checking I between the ISF and the ETMF, I saw that documents were missing. And the reason why I was so quick to find them, because sites that I inherited also had those same documents missing. So I said, well, let me go and check to make sure that hers were there. So another tip, if you're a CRA and you inherit a site like towards the end because they have moved resources to another study that might be starting up because it's not really anything left to do but to close out, it is important to do a complete ISF check before you close out that site. So those are things you can do to bridge the gap. You can get with a mentor. You can be upfront with your line manager of things you need help with. The individual that's above you associated with the trial, depending on your organization, it might be called a clinical trial manager or clinical operations leader, whatever their role is called. Go to them. If you're not understanding, I know you don't want to seem incompetent or you don't want to seem like you don't know in other words, don't know what you're doing, but you want to prevent an error because it's best to ask for help to prevent a disaster. That's my motto. Um, and it's also more important to be accurate than to be fast because being fast is going to come. Because typically, when I co-monitor with somebody, they say, well, how are you so fast? Because I focused on accuracy first. I made sure I understand how to do drug reconciliation, how all the documents that I need to review. And as I got that process down pat, then the speed came. So it's not about you want to deliver quality review of your sites. Um, Another thing I think is beneficial that I learned from being a coordinator before being a CRA, I didn't like waiting on the follow-up letter to find out what it was that we needed to do. So my process is I make a chart of my subjects that I review, and I got a comment section of things that I found that were an issue or a discrepancy. And I comment, all good if don't find any, and I type out my discrepancies. Then I go to the ISF checklist and I indicate what should be present, like anything that new that came since the last time I was there. I highlight it yellow if it's missing. It's green if it was there. I sit down with my CRC or I just email them those things. I get them about an hour to fix up until it's time for me to go. If they fix it before I leave, good. No issue has to be created. But if they didn't fix it before I leave, I know that I have to create an issue in my report, but they have up to 14 days before they possibly get that. So what I do, I created what's called a post-visit email. And that email details anything that the PI needs to do, anything that the regulatory coordinator needs to do, and anything that the study coordinator needs to do, along with the copy of that chart of the subjects I reviewed and a copy of the chart that I made for the ISF checklist. And so that covers me and it covers the sites. Not only does it give them the opportunity to move faster on correcting those issues and getting those things done, it allows you to close your report issues faster. It allows you to remember from your notes when you're writing your report what did you notice during your visit and what you didn't notice during your visit. So that process, and again, and my sites know my color code. So yellow means it's something you need to do. Green means I verified it. Orange means it's about to expire. Red means it has expired. And blue means it's pending. Typically, pending, what I highlight blue is the follow-up letter. So when I look through that ISF checklist and I confirm that that confirmation letter is there for that date, I have a slash that says follow-up letter. And I highlight that blue because, of course, the follow-up letter hasn't been created yet. So my sites seem to like that process, and it helps me and it helps them. But I don't know if I would have understood the importance of understanding that my study is not that site's only study, and the faster that they can correct their deviations or their mistakes or their EDC discrepancies, the faster they can move on to their other studies. And I feel like being a study coordinator helps me kind of understand what the site needs and what the site doesn't need. Site doesn't need a micromanager, but they do need oversight. I've noticed if you micromanage, then you're typically not going to get a response from your site. If you're not available when they need you, they're typically might not be quote unquote available when you need them. So remember again, as I stated at the beginning, you want to treat your site like you are there to serve them. They're not there to serve you. They're not your employees. We are in a collaborative, innovative relationship to move science forward. And again, these are my social media platforms. This will be uploaded to YouTube. This is my email address if you wanted to email me any questions related to this video, or if you don't want to put them in the comment section. And that is Dr. Hood Research, one word, at gmail.com. This is my LinkedIn profile. I shared reshare job postings on my LinkedIn. I am so in addition to these open discussions and clinical research training, I do offer resume revamping. Just because I kind of got an insight of what a CRA or various roles in research need to become those different type of roles. So I offer a resume revamp. I offer mock interviewing. So should a person want to practice questions that they feel like a recruiter is going to ask them, we can practice that, and I can give you some feedback on what you shouldn't say. I do have a Facebook page as well. And of course, like I said, YouTube, and I have TikTok. So I wanted to continue these open discussions. I invite people to join, but I'm not gonna not talk about the topic, but just because I don't have individuals to join. I want to put this out there so people can gain some knowledge or some insight on different topics. So I have the CRA life. This is things related to CRA. And then I have the clinical research life. So just overall things that's going on, or clinical research talk, I should say. So just overall things going on in clinical research. So I hope you learn something or can take away something from watching this video. I want to appreciate you for watching this video. And I ask that you please like, comment, share, and subscribe.